There are so many Beatles songs where they are just a little thing, and that just sort of, well, it may be a good song, and it could be a good song without it, but it makes it so much better. And I, I, I know all of you who are Beatles fans, you can mention so many examples of it, so I won't begin here to say a lot about that, because you all know it. You all heard all these fantastic songs, and there are all these fine little details that making it so much better, and making it so much more than just a good song. Uh, and there you may have seen that live recording of Paul McCartney. I actually think it's in the Cavern Club or something. It's a kind of little and thing, and for just a little crowd, and he's playing in spite of all the dangers, and is telling the crowd to sing that bit, that um, and they kind of does it there. Of course, Paul McCartney knows how his own song should be played, so he knows how important that is. But those old quarrymen, they totally missed the point, and playing a version of In Spite of All the Dangers without that and it all falls to pieces. It's like, well, let me come up with just one example. It's actually from after the Beatles, from the solo careers. Imagine, that piano intro. Bum 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 ba ba bum bum. You could play just those chords, and it would work. It could be the intro to a song, but it's that little thing, ba 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 bum. Is that what make it kind of give it its character, its definitive character? If you were just playing the chords, it was like it could be Imagine, or it could be maybe another song. But that da ba da bum, that's the characteristic, and that was making it Imagine. And at the same time, it's something that makes a great song even better. And the same thing with In Spite of All the Danger, and that and I've really given it and yes, and one thing more. Well, you can find some examples of skiffle recordings with there are some harmonics and voices and such things, but it was not that common. And that sort of thing with contrasting voices, one singing that, and there was this cold response thing. Well, there are some examples, but it's very few. The common thing was that you had a lead singer singing the verse, and then everybody joined in as the chorus. And that was it. That making a contrasting voice, and it's a kind of trademark for a lot of the things Beatles did later on. Take for No One, with that oboe coming in and playing this little melody of its own, and that sort of things. And one thing I want to say about that is there has been said so much about when the Beatles went into their experimental period. But let me tell you, they were experimental right from the beginning, and was always trying out ideas and doing kind of everything they could sort of, and said, well, let's try this, let's try that, and oh, we might do this a little different. And they were not experimental in the psychedelic sense. They were not making Sgt. Pepper back in the 50s. Of course they were not. But they were experimental in the sense that they were all the time trying out new ideas. And from the anthology, just those few examples they use there kind of show it. And also kind of how much fun they had with it. There is this song, what's the title? Oh, it's gone now. This parody of the Ink Spots, where they got that talking part with, my darling, when you burned the toast the other day. And it's so funny, If any of you don't know the Ink Spots, but have heard that and thought, oh, that's kind of funny, well, listen to some Ink Spots, and then go back and listen to that, and you will find it 10 times more funny, because it's such a good parody. They really nailed it. They got the style of the Ink Spots so perfect. Oh, it irritates me. I can't recall the title of the song. But all those things were trademarks for Beatles later on, trying out new ideas, going into areas of all kinds of music and having fun with it. There was always this kind of jolly and excited, oh, it's funny to me to play music, and we are having a good time. Well, at least until some point. Then they were not having a good time anymore. Some say that new Get Back documentaries kind of say something else and tells you, oh, that is not the fact. And if you've seen it, you know that, okay, it was not like you have heard about, that they hated each other and couldn't be in the same room, and it was so awful. Well, obviously it was not like that, but in some points it doesn't change the story. The Beatles actually did break up, no matter for what reasons. It was not like, oh, okay, then they made 15 albums more through the 70s and 80s. They didn't. Well, at least not together. So they break up, no matter the reasons. And for whatever any reasons, the last albums is having really got that, cheerful and exciting sound. And I think it's most obvious on the White Album and Let It Be. Abbey Road, there is a bit of it, but not quite like it used to be. It's more like they are now they are showing how far they had come, and they are kind of growing up as musicians, so they're making this very, what do you call it, mature adult album, and sounding so professional, and they really come a long way back from In Spite of All the Dangers. Oh, sorry, I lost my way again, and blah, 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 sorry. The only thing I was trying to say is that for such a long time I have thought, okay, there's Ain't She Sweet from 61, and that's how far back as you can go. And suddenly I discovered, well, you can go some years further back, and there actually is a lot of material, much more than is included in the anthology. Some of it can be a little difficult to find, but it's possible you can find it. One particular song you won't find anywhere. And to be honest, I'm not sure if this is actually true or it's a legend. But the story goes that first time Beatles was in Hamburg. So that was actually before the Sheraton sessions. We are in 1960 here. They were Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. You know, Ringo was in Rory Storm and the Hurricanes at that point. Rory Storm and the Hurricanes were touring in Hamburg at the same time. And the story goes that the later lineup of the Beatles, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, and perhaps one more guy from Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, together actually recorded a song. It is said that the song was Gershwin's "Summertime." They were recording that song. That recording is nowhere to be found, but the story goes that there exists one copy of a printed record somewhere in the world, maybe in Paul McCartney's private collection or something. It has never been released. And I mean, wow, to hear that. Ringo as the drummer in 1960. Well, forget about that Getting Back documentary and almost everything else. It to hear that, and just try to imagine how would they play Summertime. Well, my guess is that they are leaning up at Gene Vincent's version. That was kind of the first more rock and roll oriented version of the song. You know, it used to be a jazz standard. It's by Gershwin. It's from Porgy and Bess, and all kinds of jazz musicians has played the song. Well, so it is. If you don't know, I actually met people who thought it was written by Janis Joplin because of her very famous version with that little classic theme. Da ba ba bam ba 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 bam. Well, it's much older and had been played by jazz musicians. Well, I guess since Gershwin made Porgy and Bess, it ain't necessarily so. That is also from Porgy and Bess. The first kind of rock version, that was by Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps, and many later rock-oriented versions is kind of inspired by that. There is a version by Jerry and the Pacemakers of it, and well, it's obvious they have heard the version by Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps, but they are not playing it exactly like that. They are playing it a bit slower than Gene Vincent does. But imagine that. Well, you're gonna look and search for a long time and you won't find it. I'm sorry to tell you. I would give almost anything to hear that recording just one time. I would give almost anything for that, but I don't think there's much of a change of it. It's one of those hidden secrets, just like later on with McCartney's Carnival in Light or something, that you are probably never going to hear, unfortunately. But what can you find? Well, if you want to know exactly and complete what can be found, you gotta have this book, Way Beyond Compare, The Beatles Record Legacy, Volume 1, from 57 to 65. In this book, it's not such a storytelling narrative, it's pure facts all the way. And you can find every recording made and also some information about where to get. I'm afraid I promised you too much. No. This recording was released, and so on. So if you really want to know what exists and where to get it, this is the one. You must have this. And if you want a kind of a little different approach to John Lennon and especially his younger years, there is this book written by his sister or half-sister. It is. They didn't have the same father, but Julia was the mother to both of them, and she's also called Julia Baird. That must be a name she had married to, I guess. There's a picture of her behind. You can see there are some resemblance with John, and she tells about that. You know, she met him when he was a child. But don't think that everything here is stone hard facts. It is not. One thing that is a bit embarrassing, I would say, is that she tells this story about John being born while there was a bomb attack of German aeroplanes. There wasn't. That's a myth. I know it's a really good story, and I love the story, but it's not true. He was not. There were actually an interval of several days where there were not any bomb attacks on Liverpool.